Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD, where we get to answer your questions about Lyme disease. For those of you that are new here, welcome. And for those of you that are coming back again, I'm glad to see you. I see on my list that I have that shows on my side, I can tell who's here, and I see a number of familiar names. And so I look forward to being able to work with newcomers as well as those of you that have been here before. The way these webinars work, you create them with your questions. And to do that, you go ahead and write them to me. And you can do that by filling out the box over here on the right-hand side of the screen, right down there at the bottom, okay? Fill that out. I ask that you do not hit the enter key, though, until you've written your whole question. And the reason for that is that when you hit the enter key, it actually creates a separate question on my side and makes it very difficult for me to follow if I have to keep chasing different parts of the question through the list as they show up on my side, okay? And try to keep your questions brief too, so they actually fit in that space then as well. I am creating a recording of tonight's webinar, and tomorrow morning you will get a copy of that or an email notification about a copy of that recording. That email notification should get to you somewhere around 6:30 in the morning is usually when I'm able to put that together. I have to do a little bit of brief editing of the video, so for me to put that all together and get it out to you usually takes around that time. So around 6 to 6:30 in the morning, Seattle time, and I'm in Pacific Daylight Time out here. So if you're on the East Coast, expect it more like around 9 or 9:30, okay? Yeah, and then, so this is the last webinar for this month. I will have an April series too, and tomorrow morning when you get the email notification from me about tonight's recording, you'll be able to also have a link on there that you'll be able to click to sign up for the April series too. So anyhow, we'll get started here in a second. Just so you know, you may be hearing, I've got a little bit of a raspy voice tonight. I'm going to see how long I hold up. I started picking up some kind of a cold virus this morning. And I notice my voice is starting to go just a little bit. So we'll see if how long I hold up. I may not make the whole hour and a half tonight, maybe an hour. We'll see how that goes. And yes, to keep this from becoming something big, I have been taking my Pro Boost. Many of you know that I advocate taking a substance called thymus gland protein A, also sold as a product called Pro Boost, that acutely turns on the antiviral part of your immune system to fight infections. Usually you do one packet under your tongue every 2 hours, 3 times on the first day, and then every 8 hours on the second day. Usually that keeps these things from mounting into something big, and I suspect that I probably tomorrow shouldn't have too much trouble. So many of you, I get questions later that people say, did you do the things you recommend? Absolutely, I do the things that I recommend, okay? So for those of you that are wondering what I just talked about, what is Marty Ross's viral control formula? I'm just going to show it to you real quick. I'm going to do a screen share here. All right, so this is the Treat Lyme book. And to find the article that I have about how do you treat cold and flu or any kind of virus, take a look in the infection treatment plan section here. Scroll down to this, keep this cold and flu package on hand for fast results. And this talks about this thymic protein A that I was just telling you about, okay? All right. All right, so let me go back here and start taking your questions. All right, so as I'm doing these questions, for those of you that are live in the webinar tonight, you're actually going to get to see the question posted on your screen. For those of you that are listening to a recorded version of it, you won't be able to see the question posted because it only shows up in the live webinar. So I get to read them. So you get to listen to me do that too. All right, so let's go ahead with the first question. This is from Oscar. Hello, Dr. Ross. Hello, Oscar. Is it okay to take one option from each of your 3 relapse prevention regimens, Lyme, Bart, and Babesia at once? Any specific combinations you would recommend to keep all 3 at bay? And is alcohol okay with all of them? Or okay with them? Thank you. Okay, so my relapse prevention, Oscar, is actually written more for Lyme relapse because it is my opinion that with the correct kind of regimen to treat Babesia and to treat Bartonella, you can eradicate it. You can wipe it out 95% of the time. So when you look at the article that I've written about how to prevent a Lyme relapse, it's actually written about the Lyme disease, okay? And so the relapse prevention protocol that I have basically says to do some basic things at the end of a Lyme treatment to keep the germ from coming back. Because I think that if you've had Lyme in you for a year or more, there's a great likelihood that even when we use antibiotics, we're not eradicating, we're not wiping out Lyme, but rather what we're doing, the best we're doing is knocking it down under control. So the basic steps that anyone should do to prevent relapse are get sleep, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, because that keeps your immune system working well. Number 2, exercise to tolerance. So find a type of exercise that you could do regularly that doesn't cause you to be knocked down the next day, okay? Because that helps support the immune system. Number 3, be on a good multivitamin. Number 4, eat organic foods. You don't want to put poisons in you, okay? Number 5, consider being on something to stimulate the immune system, all right? And that can either be mushrooms, and for that I like using a medical mushroom mix that has about 5 different kind of mushrooms in it. The formula I use is something called the 5 mushroom formula. Mushrooms are great at turning on the type of white blood cells that fight Lyme, okay? Or the other thing that people could do instead of doing that is to be on something called transfer factor L+. It was formerly called transfer factor Lyme+. It's now called transfer factor L+. What transfer factors are is they're proteins made by the immune system, white blood cells, when they see an infection, and they give information to the army part of the immune system that actually fights that infection, okay? And there are transfer factors that are made against every kind of germ. So there's transfer factors against cold viruses, transfer factors against bacteria that cause skin infections, and there's transfer factors against Lyme and the co-infections. The most specific product that I have seen, that I have run across, is a product made by Research Nutritionals called Transfer Factor L+, that has in it transfer factors against Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia anaplasma, 3 different viruses, and something called Chlamydia pneumoniae and Mycoplasma pneumoniae. And so I sometimes, a lot of people do that. That's 1 pill twice a day. Or again, you could do the 5 mushroom formula that I recommend. That would be 1 pill 3 times a day, okay? And then finally, sometimes it's okay to wait and see what happens with that regimen, or sometimes you might just want to be on a low dose herbal or prescription antibiotic to keep Lyme from coming back. If you're to do that herbally, I recommend Banderol, which is Otoba bark extract, and Cemento, which is cat's claw. Those 2 herbs, you could take them, you could work up to 15 drops twice a day. Normally when I'm using them to treat Lyme, I'm going to do about 30 drops twice a day. But as a preventive regimen, you can do about 15 drops twice a day. Or you might want to consider being on a single antibiotic, like a Biaxin 500 milligrams once or twice a day, or Zithromax 500 milligrams once a day. There's various antibiotic regimens you can use too. But Oscar, I usually don't do anything specific in terms, again, of preventive regimens for Bartonella or Babesia, because with the way I treat those, with the protocols I have, you can get rid of those 95% of the time. All right. So to give you all more information, like what do I mean by what I recommend, let me go ahead and do a quick screen share here. All right, so these are articles within the Treat Lyme book. And I'm going to go ahead and do the chapter section here. I'm going to look at infection treatment plans, okay? So I have an article called Kills Babesia Brief Guide. These are my treatment recommendations for how you kill Babesia. I also have another article called Kills Bartonella, a Brief Guide. That's where you would look up how I recommend to treat those infections, okay? All right, and then if you're looking at relapse prevention, the article that I have on that, take a look at this chapter called End of Treatment, and read my article called Finished and How to Prevent Relapse. In here, I also put the article called Transfer Factors Turn on the Army, where I describe what transfer factors are too. Okay, all right. So let me go back here. Okay, now I have to let everyone in on a clue here for a little bit. So as many of you know, the Treat Lyme book is a pay. You have to pay to read those articles. But for a limited time here, actually, you don't have to pay. And the reason is I'm having trouble with the service that provides the paywall. In other words, that system that you have to pay, it's not functioning. And I don't know when I'm going to get it fixed. So for those of you that have been wanting to look for free, feel free to do that maybe over the next few days. I assume I'm finally going to find a solution here. It's a problem that developed over a few days ago, so I had to turn it off so people could read the articles. So for right now, any of these articles I'm showing you, you can read for free. Now, for those of you that realize this is a good deal and still want to support the work, I appreciate if you would. So let me show you how you would still go ahead and support and pay for it so that when I turn the paywall back on, you actually are a subscriber, all right? So the way to do that is go ahead to my screen that says About, and that's where you can still purchase a subscription. And again, for probably the next few days, you're not going to need to have a subscription to read this, but support the services. If you're getting benefit, I appreciate if you'd pay to support the services for what you're using here. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. All right, Oscar, thank you for that question and good luck to you. Hello, Kit. Let's see. I just finished 3 milligrams of ivermectin for 5 days. Had all sorts of joint pain return that I haven't had in a while. Could this be a herx? So yes. So everyone, ivermectin is a medicine that we use for some parasites. It can be used to treat pinworm, for instance, or parasites in general, I should say, but a limited number. It's not as big of a killer as, for instance, a drug called Alinea that treats about every kind of parasite. Ivermectin treats a small number of parasites. And yeah, if you happen to have parasites and it's killing them, that can sometimes trigger a Herxheimer reaction as well, too. So if you got worse, it probably would be from a Herx reaction. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Kit. Good luck to you. Hello, Brenda. Let's see. Thank you, Dr. Ross. I'm grateful for your help. You're welcome. Have you used Ceftin for Lyme or Bartonella? Does it work better than amoxicillin for Lyme? I'm looking for a combination of antibiotics for Lyme and Bart. I can't take the quinolones or Bactrim. Would like to hold off on Doxy and Minnow for now. Okay, so Ceftin, everyone, is also known as cefuroxime. And it works in an almost identical fashion to the way that amoxicillin, which is a penicillin, works, okay? So the cephalosporins and the penicillins, amoxicillin to penicillin, basically work on the spirochete form of Lyme. And the way that they work is they block the ability for the germ to repair itself after it's been injured. So a Lyme germ, basically the covering, the shell on it, the spirochete that is, of the spirochete form of the germ, will basically develop holes and it needs to repair it. But the cephalosporins and the amoxicillin or the penicillins block that from happening. All right. So the cephalosporins, like Ceftin, and amoxicillin, which is a penicillin, basically treat the cell wall form of Lyme, which is the spirochete. Okay. They probably don't do any, or they don't do anything for intracellular Lyme, the second form of Lyme that lives inside of cells. And it is probably likely that they don't actually treat the cyst form of the germ, although there are some Petri dish experiments that suggest that amoxicillin can. So I think the jury is still out on that. I wouldn't necessarily use them as a cyst buster, but maybe they do, maybe they don't, okay? Now, can Ceftin or amoxicillin actually treat Bartonella? No, and I wouldn't use them to treat Bartonella. And the reason is Bartonella is an infection that gets into the intracellular space, all right? And so we need to be able to have things that get inside, and I would not call Ceftin is not an agent to do that. To treat Bartonella, you need to work with agents that get inside, that don't treat from the outside, that actually get inside, that are intracellular agents. And those are Bactrim, the quinolones like Cipro or Levaquin, doxycycline, and the tetracyclines like minocycline, like you list here, and the macrolides, which would be things like Biaxin and Zithromax, okay? So unfortunately, there are a few options you do have, though. Okay, so if you want to treat Bartonella, you could use a drug called rifampin, which is an old tuberculosis medicine, actually, and it does a good job of getting at Bartonella. Rarely, I'll even use it as a single agent to treat Bartonella, although, as many of you know, I think the best way to treat Bartonella is to be on 2 prescription antibiotics. Generally, 2 prescription antibiotic combinations will work effectively on Bartonella about 80 to 85% of the time. And one way to build that is with a rifampin-based combination, rifampin coupled with a tetracycline, or rifampin coupled with Bactrim, which you can't do here because of your sensitivities. Or you can make it rifampin coupled with Zithromax or rifampin coupled with Biaxin. So what you might want to do is use the rifampin combined with the Biaxin, for instance. If you were to do that, Biaxin treats spirochete Lyme and intracellular Lyme. Rifampin, although we're using it for Bartonella, treats the cyst form of Lyme too, and may actually pick up some of the intracellular Lyme. And when it comes to Bartonella, rifampin would be the lead agent, and Biaxin would help support it. For Biaxin, though, you could also substitute in Zithromax. You could use that as a replacement for the Biaxin, okay? So that might be something for you to think about. Could you use Sefton along with the Biaxin, Zithromax, or rifampin? Yeah, you could use it with as part of that regimen. It would treat the spirochete cell wall. You don't necessarily need it, though. I find that a combination of Biaxin or Zithromax coupled with rifampin is enough to treat all 3 forms of the Lyme germ without necessarily needing to be on a cell wall agent. Keep in mind, any of these intracellular antibiotics get inside of the spirochete and work to prevent its growth by blocking protein production, so the germ withers and die. So to kill a spirochete, you don't necessarily need to take something that attacks its covering from the outside, okay? All right, so those are just some thoughts for you, Brenda. Good luck to you. Let's see, another question from Brenda. Also, do you ever recommend a brain MRI with contrast for your patients? So an MRI, everyone, is an X-ray that you can do of the brain that gives you an idea about the anatomy. It tells us about the structure of the brain. It does not tell us about the function part of the brain. Okay, so I just want to let you know, it doesn't tell you whether you can think right or not. So people can have severe thinking impairments and still have nothing show up in terms of the architecture, the structures of the brain, for instance. Okay, now I would consider doing an MRI of the brain if I'm thinking that somebody might have multiple sclerosis Lyme, where they actually have problems where they've lost vision maybe, or they've lost function of their hands or their arms or their legs. I might look to see if there are lesions in the brain, a structural problem in the brain that shows up. You don't necessarily need to do it with contrast, although if you do it with contrast, gives you a better way of looking for blood vessel problems that might be part of the problem as well too. All right. So anyhow, thanks for that question, Brenda. Hello, John. Hold on here a minute. Everyone just got to take a sip of water. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for the Treat Lyme book and this webinar. You're welcome. I've been on NT Factor for 1 week now, and it's causing muscle loss and more fat flab. Should I still take it? Also, for Diflucan, is it okay to only take once a week due to the long 30-hour half-life and my ongoing liver problems? Thank you. All right. You know, John, I have never seen anyone have problems with the NT factor causing muscle loss and fat flab. If you've only been doing this for a week, I would probably suggest stopping it, seeing if that muscle mass loss and fat flab stabilizes. And if it does, add it back in again to try and see if it really is the problem. I'm kind of doubtful it is. I haven't seen it happen, but there is a rule of law that I have in practicing medicine, which is anything can happen to anyone with anything, all right? Which means there are common side effects that we have with medicines, and then there are those things that actually happen in people. And so anything we take has a potential of having side effect problems, okay? So maybe it's giving that kind of problem. I wouldn't describe it as a common one, all right? Now, with your diflucan, I don't think taking it once a week is going to be enough to get rid of yeast on a chronic nature. If you are, if you have ongoing liver problems, you might consider taking it twice a week or maybe every other day. But generally, even with that long half-life, half-life, everyone, is the time it takes for half of a drug to get out of you. Keep in mind that with 4 half-lives, all of the drug is out of you, okay? So that means in 120 hours, which would be roughly 5 days or so, all that drug would be out of you, and that's not going to work effectively. You want to keep some of that drug in you to get rid of the yeast, all right? So even with your liver problems. So I would recommend taking it at least 2 or 3 times a week. That would be my thoughts on that, okay? And then let's see. Yeah, I think that answers your question. All right, good luck to you, John. Thank you for that question. Hello, Tamara. Let's see. Hi, I've been sick for 6 years. Diagnosed 2 years ago, have been petrified to start treatment as I am hyperreactive to everything that I had tried in the past before my diagnosis. I'm marginally functional and so afraid of getting worse with treatment. How does one work through this intense fear? Wow. I can understand how petrifying this might be for you. So the one thing that, just a comment, I don't know that I have a great idea of how to work through your intense fear, but I will say if you are a person, there are some things you might consider as you build a treatment, okay? And maybe that will help you with some of the fear that you have. So number one, when I see somebody that has medicine sensitivity and reactivity to a lot of different things, there are 2 problems that I want to correct or look into, okay? One is a detoxification problem called MTHFR, and the second is the possibility that you might have too many yeast living in your intestines, okay? All right, so let me talk about each of those. So MTHFR, those letters stand for something called methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. Okay, now I know that's a mouthful. That's an enzyme. And that enzyme is responsible for taking folate from our diet and activating it into the active form, which is something called 5-methyl-tetrahydrofolate or 5-MTHF, all right? Now, why does that matter? Well, the major detox chemical that is used by our liver to pull toxins out so that we can handle medicines or any toxin for that matter is glutathione. And the liver needs lots of glutathione to detox, all right? So the glutathione is a downstream product. It's down here. And there's many chemical reactions that have to take place beginning all the way up here where we take folate and activate it with MTHFR. Now, if you have a genetic defect of that, a genetic defect that can lead to problems with how the enzyme functions, that means down here, you're not going to get enough glutathione, okay? And some of these smaller reactions in here that also help with detox aren't going to take place correctly either. So there's a test you can do to see if you have the MTHFR genetic profile that would suggest that your MTHFR did not turn out correctly, okay? And that's to do a genetic test. You might check and see if your insurance will pay for it. If not, the way that you would get it done is get a hold or go to a website called geneticgenie.org. That's genetic as in GENETIC, and then Genie, GENIE.org. All right. And on their landing page, they're going to have a link to go to a program called 23andMe. Now, 23andMe has a test kit that you send spit in, and they do an analysis of the genetic makeup of you from a detoxing standpoint, all right? And they provide that information, all right? Now, if you have a defect in one of the 2 following genes, one is called C677T, and the other one is called A1298C. If you have any kind of a defect in any one of those, you might benefit for correcting the problem. And the way that you correct the problem is to take the activated folate, called 5-methotetrahydrofolate, usually at 1 milligram a day, coupled with the activated form of vitamin B12, a methylated form of B12 called methylcobalamin. Okay, all right. So there's some subtleties of how you start that. I'll show you the article about MTHFR here in a minute. All right. The other thing I have found that can really make somebody drug sensitive is if they happen to have too many yeast living in their intestines. All right. And so our yeast are full of intestine, our bacteria, our intestines are full of yeast and bacteria. If bacteria overgrow, they lead to more of an inflammation reaction. And those bacteria, or the yeast also, if they overgrow, lead to toxin release, okay? That can make us sensitive to all kinds of medicines, all right? All right, and there are steps you can take to figure out if you might have too many yeast, all right? So I'm gonna do a quick screen share here so you can help figure these two things out. So number one, let's see. All right, so to see if you might have that MTHFR problem, or if you want to read more about what you do to correct it, or the testing that I just recommended, go to my chapters tab here, go to the detoxification tab, and then you want to go ahead and look at the MTHFR article, which is this one called MTHFR and Detoxification, a Lyme bite. Okay, all right, and it is actually has in it a recording from a previous webinar I had about that. All right, The other thing that you want to do in terms of figuring out if you have too many yeast is you want to look at the chapter called How to Diagnose, which is right here. And you want to come down here and look at the article I've written called A Silent Problem, Do You Have Yeast? And it describes the steps you would take to figure out if you have too many yeast, okay? All right, so let me go back here. Okay, so Tamara, you want to go ahead and look to see, do you have too many yeast, and fix it. You also want to go ahead and try to correct MTHFR if you have it, all right? Then, if you've done that, then as you start treating for Lyme, you want to use extremely small doses. And I would probably go herbal. I would probably use herbal approaches. So for instance, you could use the herbal combination to treat your Lyme germ of banderol and cemento. I already mentioned those earlier tonight. Banderol is otoba bark extract. Cemento is cat's claw. There's Petri dish experiments that came out about 6 years ago now that showed when you use those two herbs together, they cause a really good killing of Lyme. And in fact, they remove biofilm. I find that they work about 85 to 90% of the time, which is as good as prescription antibiotics. Normally, I want to slowly work a person up to 30 drops twice a day. And I normally would start a person at 50 drops, 5 drops 2 times a day. And then I would increase every other day by 1 drop per dose until I get up to the 30 drops twice a day. And I always tell a person when we do that, if they are getting worse, if they're getting anything that looks like a Herxheimer reaction, they should not increase until that Herxheimer reaction has passed, okay? Now, in my medicine-sensitive patients, what I do with that combination is I start at 1 drop a day. And if they have a bad reaction on that, I tell them stop. And then I'll have them do it at 1/2 drop a day. Now, how do you do a half drop? Well, what you do is you take a drop, you put it in 2 ounces of water, and then you divide that in half. So each ounce of water has half a drop in it then. Okay, that's how you do that. But you just want to start low and slow. Okay, so correct MTHFR if you have it. Make sure you don't have a yeast problem, and if you do, correct that. All right, and then consider starting low and slow with your medications. Okay, all right. One last thing. Make sure you also, as part of your treatment, take curcumin, which is a component of turmeric, the Indian seasoning turmeric. And you want to take that to limit the amount of inflammation chemicals that your body makes called cytokines. The immune system makes too many cytokines whenever it sees Lyme. And it's too many cytokines that give you some of that reactivity as well, too, and give you Herxheimer reaction, give you all your Lyme symptoms, all right? I don't see people that are medicine sensitive to curcumin. And the product I like for curcumin is one that is microscopically wrapped in fat, made by Thorne, called Mariva 500. It's a 500 milligram pill, and you would do one pill 3 times a day. All right. So let me just do a quick screen share here. I want you to see some of these things that I've been recommending here. All right, so this is the supplement store that I maintain called Marty Ross MD Supplements. If you're wondering where you can find some of the things I recommend, you can find it here. If you're wondering what I consider to be high quality supplements, ones that have done a great job selecting the most active ingredients, you'll find them here, okay? I also pick supplements here that tend not to have a lot of artificial fillers in them that could hurt you, all right? So in terms of the Otoba bark extract and the cemento, those are made by a company called Nutrimetics. All right, and there's your banderol right there, okay? And then this is the cemento, all right? So you would want to start low and slow with these, for instance, okay? In terms of what do I recommend for the curcumin? All right, so I like the Mariva 500 SF that I was telling you about earlier, okay? And then in terms of what would I do to treat the MTHFR, I usually like to start people on a product called MethylGuard, which is also made by Thorne. And this is a mixture of the methylated form of vitamin B12 as well as that activated folate. And the way you would start that is at 1 pill a day, and then after a week you go up to 2 pills a day, and then after another week you go up to 3 pills a day. Sometimes, so with people, if they're really medicine sensitive, you just can't even increase that quickly either, okay? You sometimes have to go slow in terms of how quickly you increase that as well too, all right? So anyway, I wanted to show you that's the supplement store that I maintain. That's where my patients get their supplements. Those are high quality supplements, all right? Keep in mind, there's been numerous studies where people go into supplement stores or agencies go to supplement stores. Most recently, New York State went into supplement stores and found that the majority of stuff that's on those supplement stores is garbage, okay? You've got to make sure if you're going to use supplements that you use high quality. I've taken the guesswork out for you in terms of what I've put at Marty Ross MD Supplements, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Tamara. Hello, Debbie. Let's see. Any thoughts about PEMF mats? Can you hear from them? Thanks for your time. You know, Debbie, I haven't actually used the PEMF mats before, so I can't comment, and I'm not totally clear if they're useful or not. So I'm sorry, I don't have that information for you. Okay, all right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Victoria. Hold on here a minute. Hi, Dr. Ross. Once you start NDT meds for hypothyroid, can you ever get off of them completely? Also, why don't you pulse cemento and banderol like you do antibiotics? Thanks so much. All right, so I'm not sure what you mean by the initials NDT. I think you may mean like natural thyroid or thyroid, armor thyroid or desiccated thyroid, or even a synthetic thyroid like Synthroid or Cytomel. You know, if you have Lyme and Lyme is suppressing your thyroid function, it is very possible that as you get Lyme corrected, that you'll be able to get off your thyroid medications. Okay. So in Lyme disease, one of the reasons people have thyroid dysfunction is that when the immune system again sees Lyme, to get rid of it, it makes cytokines, right? Many of you have heard me in my webinars talk about cytokines before. And cytokines are good and bad. On the good side, they turn the immune system on. That's good. But in Lyme, the immune system often doesn't do a good job, and it tries harder and harder, and eventually it makes too many cytokines, okay? And one of the things that too many cytokines do is they interfere with the brain, an area of the brain called the hypothalamus pituitary that regulates the thyroid. And if that part of the brain isn't working correctly, the thyroid's not going to work correctly, all right? So now what happens is as you treat Lyme and somebody starts getting better and all of these cytokines come down, they often don't need to be on as much thyroid, and often they can get off the thyroid medication as well too. Okay, so to answer that part of your question, all right. Now, in terms of the cemento and banderol, I actually have been experimenting lately with pulsing the cemento and banderol, and I'm getting pretty good results. I'll do that either, I think many of you are aware, I've got a whole article about pulsing antibiotics. And in that, you can do what I suggest if you're going to pulse, do a 4-day on, 3-day off regimen is one possibility. There's also a 2-month on, 2-month off regimen. And you can even layer the approaches together. So during the 2 months that you take them for 4 days on and 3 days off as you're taking them for 2 months. So I do use cemento and banderol as part of that. And actually, I have to see my article that I've written about that. I'm not sure if I mentioned you can do that with the banderol cemento in there or not. So let's go look at that together here. All right, so let's see. I'm just going to search for pulsing antibiotics. How to pulse antibiotics for Lyme. Let's see, did I talk about doing banderol cemento that way? Huh. You know, actually, I did not actually state in this article which antibiotics, but as far as I'm concerned, the only one you can't pulse is the prescription antibiotic called Zithromax. And the reason I don't pulse that one is that it is extremely long acting. Once you take that pill of Zithromax, it's got an elimination half-life that is extremely long, the amount that it takes for half of it to get out of you. And because of that long elimination half-life, even if you start and stop it for a few days, it's still going to be in you. So you don't get the benefit of having it out of you. The reason to pulse is to have a period where the antibiotics are actually out of you, okay? So that's the only one I recommend you don't. But you could pulse the banderol cemento. And I have been doing that recently with some good success on that too. All right. Thanks for that question, Victoria. Hello, Val. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. What effects could a 10-day course of amoxicillin and clavulanic acid 2 times per day prescribed for respiratory infection have on Lyme, Bart, Babesia, and other tick-borne infections? How would that compare with the 8-day course of Bactrim? Thanks so much. All right. So Augmentin, or amoxicillin with clavulanic acid, is also called Augmentin. All right. And it's really only going to be useful for spirochete Lyme. It is not going to have effect on Bartonella and Babesia. All right, to answer that part of your question. All right, now, can Bactrim, like an 8-day course of Bactrim, have any benefit? Yeah, that can help Bartonella, may help Babesia, but by itself, I would not find it to be useful for Lyme. Okay, by itself, I wouldn't find it to be useful for Lyme. Is an 8-day course enough to make any difference for any of these infections? Probably not. So to answer that part of your question, I don't think an 8-day course is worth anything, actually, when it comes to treating these kind of infections, okay? I don't think it's long enough. All right. Good luck to you, Val. Thank you for that question. Hello. Let's see, Dana or Dana, and I can't tell the pronunciation is here just by you writing your name, but let's see. Hello, and thanks for the info each week. You're welcome. When on the Mito diet, do some foods need to count a serving in more than one food group, fat and protein, or just for the one category they're listed under? Okay, so what Dana's report talking about is I recommend my favorite diet for people with this disorder, and where I would have people start is on a paleo type diet called the Mito Food Plan. And in the article that I've written, there's some very specific information you can print out that shows you how to build your diet. And it says you're supposed to have so many servings of proteins, so many servings of vegetables, so many servings of various categories. All right. So Dana, what I would do is the categories that they are put into general. So the way that document reads and follow that document is something is not showing up in two categories. It shows up as one or the other. Okay. So use it as they lay it out in that document. Okay. All right. So what am I talking about? Let me show you real quickly. And actually, I think this is one of my free articles too, which is, as I told you all earlier tonight, the whole book is free right now because I can't get the system to work correctly. That's supposed to have people paying, but that's not going to last forever. I'm probably going to last maybe another few days before I have a chance to get it fixed here. All right, so let's look here. I think it's in the free read section. Yeah, there it is. So this article called "The Best Brain Inflammation, Pain, Energy, and Detox Diet Ever" is the Mito Food Plan, which I have been told is okay for me to use from a group called the Institute for Functional Medicine. If you look through here, there's a video about how do you use this. That's from when I didn't have too much hair. And then there's documents that you can download that tell you how to build the diet too. So take a look here. You'll see, for those of you that are not familiar, you'll see what I mean by this. And yes, I like this diet. The reason I like this diet is that I like it for a few reasons. Let me get over to where I can see you guys. The reason I like it is, number one, it's low in sugar, carbs, and therefore it's going to make it harder for you to feed your yeast, okay? Number two, most people with Lyme have a degree of mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria are the energy factories in our body. And using this diet is a way of supporting your energy factories, your mitochondria, which also helps your brain work better, okay? Also, this diet has built into it periods of intermittent fasting. And fasting is good because it causes the brain to produce a chemical called brain-derived neurotropic growth factor that helps your brain grow. Your nerve connections regrow. Yes, even in Lyme, you can regrow those nerve connections, okay? So I like it for that reason. The last reason I like it is that it relies on a good balance of healthy fats that can help promote nerve function, okay? And also, it is based on using organic foods if you can, so you're not putting more poisons in, okay? So take a look at that diet. That is my favorite diet. Now, I got to tell you, in working with the Mito Food Plan and paleo type diets, even though I like it as a general rule, some people just don't do well on that diet, all right? They can't maintain weight or their health doesn't go well, all right? So even though it's what I recommend, I really don't believe that there is one diet for everyone, okay? And even though I think for most people in theory this should be a good diet, that doesn't mean it will. So listen to your body. If your body's not doing well on this diet, then get off of this diet, okay? All right? All right. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hello, Brittany. Let's see. What do you think about using D-lactate probiotics if you have neuro issues with different neurotoxins? Brittany, I'm not familiar with using D-lactate probiotics, so I can't comment on that. Sorry about that. Hello, Colleen. Let's see. When infected with Bartonella and Babesia, do symptoms come and go, or do they stay continually? You know, the coming and going, like you got joint pain here one day, joint pain there the next day, that tends to be more of a Lyme kind of phenomenon. All right. However, having said that, yeah, Bartonella and Babesia symptoms can come and go, but they tend not to as much as what Lyme symptoms do. Okay. All right. Thank you for that question, Colleen. Hello, Lori. Hold on just a minute. Another swig of water here. Let's see. I was bit 20 years ago. As a beginner, what would you recommend as the 3 best herbs to start on? Okay. So number 1, I recommend getting on curcumin, which is that Thorn Mariva 500 that I showed you earlier tonight. Curcumin is a component of turmeric. It gets inside of white blood cells and helps lower inflammation cytokines. And if you've looked at some of my information, or if you've been on some of the webinars before, you know that when we say that somebody has Lyme symptoms, what they really have are symptoms of too many cytokines. Those cytokines are made by white blood cells when they see Lyme infection, but the immune system, and many people, doesn't do a good job getting rid of Lyme. And so therefore it tries harder and harder, eventually makes too many cytokines. Too many cytokines give you most of your Lyme symptoms, okay? They disturb your sleep centers. They make it so you can't think. They make you hurt all over. They give you fatigue. I could go down the list of what we know as Lyme symptoms are actually too many cytokine symptoms, okay? All right, now as you start killing Lyme germs, that can trigger more cytokines as well. All right, and too many cytokines suppress the immune system. So one of the best things you can do, if you can only take 3 things, is get on the curcumin, which is the Mariva 500, 500 milligrams, 1 pill 3 times a day. If you start getting into a herx reaction, I would do as 2 pills 3 times a day. Okay. All right. All right. Number 2, in terms of a supportive herb, I would be on ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is an Ayurvedic, East Indian, and Chinese medicine herb that is used to support the adrenals and the thyroid gland. It's been observed for thousands of years in Chinese medicine and in Ayurvedic East Indian medicine to help give people better energy. All right. There's animal studies that show this supports the thyroid and the adrenal glands, and the immune system works better too. And I like to do that as a 400 milligram pill, 2 pills in the morning and 2 pills between 1 and 2. The third most important supplement you can be on is a probiotic, because you want to prevent getting too many yeast. Okay. All right. Now, those are my suggestions. Okay. Now, I'm assuming you're getting prescription antibiotics. Okay. But if you're not getting prescription antibiotics, then I'm going to add 2 other things you ought to consider doing. And that's to treat your Lyme infection would be the herbs Banderol and Cemento, or the generic names on those are Otoba bark extract and Cemento is cat's claw. Those 2 herbs together work about 85 to 90% of the time. I think they can be as effective as prescription antibiotics, and they treat all 3 forms of the Lyme germ. The other advantage is they actually get rid of about 100% of biofilm, which is a slime layer that can cover Lyme germs. Okay. All right. So I would actually give you 5 things to take. Okay. So Banderol, Cemento. I would also have you take the curcumin. I would have you take ashwagandha, and I would make sure you are on a good probiotic to prevent yeast building up in your intestines, even on herbal antibiotics if you decide to do that. All right. So there, I gave you 5. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Lori. Hello, Kathleen. Thank you for doing these amazing webinars. You're welcome. Let's see. How can my Bartonella be treated if I can't tolerate rifampin or Bart? I'm currently on Ceftin, Doxy, just started Plaquenil. Thank you. All right. So there's an easy way that you could turn this regimen that you're on right now into a Bartonella treatment. And that is keep taking your Ceftin and the Doxy and add Bactrim, which is a sulfa antibiotic. In the United States, it's called Bactrim. In Canada, it's called Septra or Sulfatrim. And I think it may be hard to get in the UK, if I'm correct. Okay. Now, Doxy and Bactrim is a great Bartonella treatment. All right. And in addition, there is some Petri dish experiments that have been coming out recently by Dr. Zhang out of Johns Hopkins University that show that using the combination of Ceftin, Doxy, and Bactrim is a way to deal with this new evolving issue of something called Persister Lyme or Persister cells. Okay. So Persister cells, what are they? Well, there's been we've been wondering for some time the reason that Lyme may be difficult to get rid of is from having persisters. And there's been research coming out in the last year that shows that, yeah, Lyme can develop persisters. All right. So where do we know about persisters from? So we know that certain germs like leprosy and like tuberculosis have the ability to develop persister cells. And what a persister cell is a form of the germ that slows its metabolism way, way down to the point that it basically just starts ignoring the world around it. It goes into hibernation, all right? And it ignores the antibiotics, all right? So about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, there were some studies that came out of Northeastern University in Boston that did show that, yep, on a Petri dish, if the Lyme germ is exposed to antibiotics, about 20% of spirochetes and 20% of cyst would turn into persister cells, all right? So it's not a new form of the germ, it's just a state of a persister or a state that cysts can exist in, okay? And what those researchers were showed is that if you stop the antibiotics, literally wash them off the Petri dish. Now, we're humans, we can't wash antibiotics out of us, all right? But in those Northeastern experiments, if you wash the antibiotics off, the germ would wake up again and start responding to antibiotics. And in their experiments, when they started and stopped 4 times, they were able to completely eradicate all forms of Lyme, okay? And so it's out of that idea that we get the idea of pulse antibiotics, all right? Now, what is interesting is based on the work of Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang is teaching many of us now that he doesn't think that pulsing works as well as using certain drug combinations all the time, all right? But this is also based on Petri dish experiments. So our biggest problem in this whole area of persister Lyme is that the majority of science that's been done is Petri dish experiments, all right? And we're humans. What goes on in a Petri dish does not necessarily mean it's what's going to be able to happen in us when we try it in the real world, okay? But a Petri dish regimen that seems to out persister Lymes would be the combination of Ceftin, Doxy, and Bactrim, all right? So that's something for you to think about, okay? The other option you could look at is get rid of your Ceftin and use doxycycline in combination with Biaxin. So Doxy and Biaxin in combination is a good Bartonella treatment too. That's going to work about 75 to 80% of the time. I think a Doxy Bactrim combination is actually going to work about 80 to 85% of the time. Okay, so those are some thoughts for you. Yeah, and some of the whole persister cell issue is something that's starting to get a lot of attention. And again, it's one of those things if I get back to writing again, or when I get back to writing in the next weeks, I want to get together a article about persister Lyme. But before I do that, I have to fix my my website issue I have about the prescription or the how you subscribe for it. Okay. Anyhow, thanks for that question, Kathleen, and good luck to you. Oh, the dosing on the Bactrim is Bactrim DS, which stands for double strength, and that's 1 pill twice a day. Okay. Bye-bye. All right. Hello, Marina. Let's see. My bacteria or my Babesia is really acting up. Best 2 herbs for Babesia. Using a combo right now, but want a few highly effective single herbs. I think there may be a wandering part to your question here, Marina. Bear with me. I'm going to see if I can find it. Marina, unfortunately, I can't see the second part of your question, but if you're looking at an herbal combination that might work, or a single herb that might work, Cryptolepis, which you would get from a company here in the States called Woodland Essence, Cryptolepis, it's Cryptolepis, Cryptolepis, will work maybe about 80%, 75 to 80% of the time, okay? 5 milliliters 3 times a day. I got to tell you, it's really strong, foul-tasting stuff, all right? That's one option. The other option would be to use artemisinin I don't recommend artemisinin anymore for anyone in the East Coast United States because I don't think it works out well for Babesia out there. In the central United States and on the West Coast United States, I think it works well. I think it works well for my Canadian patients still. I'm not clear about whether it's working well for my patients from the UK at all, or those from Europe. Okay. If you were to do artemisinin, the way I like to do that, actually, let me show. I'm going to show you an article so that you can look at this later. So this is in the Treat Lyme book. All right, and take a look again at the article. I kind of mentioned it earlier tonight in the infection treatment plan section. Take a look at the article called Kills Babesia, a brief guide. And in here, I lay out all the different combinations you can do, including artemisinin and including cryptolepis. Okay, all right. So that's in that article. And as I said, at least for the next few days, I anticipate that the whole site is free for anyone to read until I can fix the subscription issue that I'm having here. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. All right. Good luck to you, Marina. Of those two herbs, I think either one you could use. However, from the East Coast United States, I'd go with the crypto. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Hello, Jacqueline. Let's see. I have Lyme. My 3 kids have Lyme. My husband having memory problems, fatigue, burst of rage about small things. Not like him at all. Do spouses often get Lyme from partner with Lyme? It's yes, they might. And that's kind of a lukewarm way of saying it. But here's what we know. Lyme, in my opinion, is not transmitted by kissing, sharing utensils, sharing toothbrushes. I know it. Sharing toothbrushes, holding hands, hugging. It's not transmitted that way. It's not transmitted through the air. Okay. However, there is some evidence that it might be transmitted, or there is some thinking with some loose science that backs it up that says it could be transmitted sexually. I hope you hear all those words I'm saying. Could be. Okay. Now, what I see in my practice is that 15% of partners both have symptoms suggesting Lyme. If I test, they both come back positive. So that seems a little high. So I think maybe it can be transmitted. What does the science tell us? Well, there's no science that proves sexual transmission. There is science that says that it can be found in the vaginal fluid and in the male ejaculate. So one study showed that of females that have it, 50% of the time it was found in their vaginal fluid. And in the same study, it was found 100% of the time in the male ejaculate. Okay. There was a second study done that was done a similar way that showed in females that have Lyme, it was in their fluid 100% of the time. And in the male ejaculate, it was there 50% of the time. So reverse results. Okay. And then there was an article published about 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago that was a horrible study. Horrible study. I want to say that again, a horrible study. And it was done by a colleague of mine named Stricker. And I think he was even quoted as saying that based on this study, we should be more afraid about what goes on in our bedroom than our backyards. And I think it was just a horrible disservice that he did. The problem is with that study, and you can, if you start searching about sexual transmission, you'll find that study. So I just want to talk about why it's not a good study. It only involved 13 people. All right. Now in medicine, the best science we have are ones that involve thousands of people when we research something. Okay. It's hard to make any general meanings about what happens to 13 people. It just is. I don't know if it means anything for a general population. All right. But there's further problems. So in that study of 13, there were 6 people that were part of couples. All right. So a male-female couple. All right. So there were 3 couples of the 13 people. And what that study did is it looked to see was Lyme in the vaginal fluid and also was it in the ejaculate. And they had the ability to see what strain of Lyme it was. So in the 3 couples, they found in each, the male or female, identical strains in that couple of Lyme. So because it was identical strains, they took it as some evidence that Lyme can be sexually transmitted. All right. Now, here's the big problem. The big problem is it only involved 13 people total in the study. Okay. But the biggest problem was they didn't control for when the last time was that the male had an ejaculation into the female, that the male actually did a deposit of his sperm and his Lyme into the female partner. All right. And because they didn't control for that, when they measure what they're measuring in the female as being a Lyme strain that is equal to the male, I can't tell if that's because it's Lyme that is in her that leaks back out into her vaginal fluid because of her Lyme disease, or is it because the male deposited his strain of Lyme in her vagina and it just happens to be hanging out there still. It's still living there, maybe even days, maybe even weeks later. We don't know. No one said the science is how Lyme will live in the vagina without getting absorbed into the female, okay? So, but the issue is, I don't know what they're measuring in the female. Is it Lyme that came from the female, or is it Lyme that was deposited in the male that hasn't actually given the female any problem at all? All right, I don't know. So it's a worthless study. So, but do I think it might be transmitted sexually? Yeah, I do, because I think I see that in about 50% of my patients. And so, yes, I think your husband probably should get himself tested to see if he might have this. Okay, all right. If you want to read more about this, there's a whole article that I have on that too. All right, so take a look at the chapter on transmission. There it is. All right, and in this I talk about that Lyme could be sexually transmitted. I also have another article that talks about how you might get it from things other than ticks as well too. Okay, all right. All right, so let's see. Let me get out of here. Okay, everyone. My voice is fading here. Some of you may be aware if you came in early in the webinar tonight that I said I started picking up something viral this morning, although I'm taking care of it with my ProBoost that I talk about all the time. Thymoglobulin protein A can stop this. It is, but what's happening is my voice is wearing and I'm starting to feel very weak with it right now. So I'm going to stop the webinar. At least I was able to be with you for an hour and 3 minutes, all right? Tomorrow you will get an email from me. If you did sign up for the webinar tonight, you'll get an email from me that tells you how to access the recording from tonight's shortened webinar, all right? I'm not going to be here next week, or at least I'm not going to do a webinar next week. The following week we'll be back on again, and look in tomorrow's email for the link to sign up for the next series of 3 webinars that I'll be doing in April. Okay. All right. Sorry having to cut this short, but I got to go home and take care of myself, and I don't want to lose my voice tonight because I have to talk with a lot of people with Lyme disease tomorrow. All right. Good night, everyone. And good luck, everyone, too. Oh, here in a second, I'm going to redirect you back over to the Treat Lyme book so that you can take a look at the information that we have there. And again, if you would, even though I know for the next few days you're not required to subscribe to the Treat Lyme book, I'd appreciate if you would look and subscribe on the About the Treat Lyme book page if you subscribe to help support the efforts that I'm doing here. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.